video. So today I want to talk about 3 little tricks I use to organize my double tracks, and 2 of them are quite common knowledge among the producers, but if you're just a guitar player you probably don't know about them, and I promise you they will make your life easier. So number 1, bus tracks. So if you have just one guitar track like that, it's quite simple to process it because you have only one track, so you just put all your effects on that track and bingo. So for example, I have an amp sim and a cap sim all in one place, simple. But if you're a metal player or a rock guitar player, for example, you probably do double tracks, and well, if you don't, you probably should. So, and that's when it gets tricky, because now we have 2 tracks to process. And what a lot of people do actually, they just copy and paste all the effects from one track to another, so you have something like that. So obviously it works and there is nothing wrong with that, but if you have to tweak something, for example, if I have to, let's say if I have to grab another impulse or tweak something with the amp settings, let's say like that, you actually have to do it twice. And if you're tweaking it, so if you're going back and forth between different settings and trying to figure out which one works the best, you have to do it all the time, so it's a little bit of nightmare. A proper way to do it is to create a bus track, and instead of processing 2 tracks separately, you just create one more track, throw all the effects on it, and send both of your guitar tracks to this track, and handle all the settings in one place. I'll show you how to do it. So in Reaper it's quite simple, so all you have to do is just create extra track. Let's just call it GR bus, and just select your 2 tracks and drag and drop on top of this bus track, and there we have it. So let me just disable the effects on those 2 tracks, and so you can hear those are just dry, unprocessed DI guitar tracks. So to make it sound like metal, for example, let me just grab a, for example, this amp and cap sim. That will be enough. So all in one place, so the effects on those 2 tracks are disabled, so those are dry, and all the effects are going on that one track. Let's hear this. So clearly it works, but if you are listening to it on your headphones or a stereo speakers, well, not on a phone anyways, you can hear that it became mono, so it's not working properly. And let me just fix that real quick, and I will explain what it is in a minute. So now it's stereo. Now it works just the way you, well, the way I intended it to work. So for example, if I want to grab some other gap impulse, for example, let's go with something, I don't know, EVH gap. It's quite dark, but whatever. Yeah, let's check this out. So you've seen right now, so I was just going back and forth between this external impulse file and default impulse sound, and just with one click I affected both tracks. Cool, right? So, but the trick here is to make it sound stereo. So you've seen at the beginning it sounded like just one mono track. And the thing is, most of the effects have those little switches. For example, this one has mono and stereo modes, and for example, if I grab another, let's go with mass, for example, here. So once again, mono, stereo, and well, basically, if you're having this type of stereo bus routing, you don't want it to be mono. So in case of this plugin, you just have two options, mono and stereo. So obviously you need stereo. And for example, with this impulse loader, you actually have three options, and that's where it gets quite confusing, because you have mono, you have dual mono, and you have stereo. And the difference between dual mono and stereo is, in this particular case, stereo is when your left channel runs through your left half of the plugin, and your right channel runs through your right side. So for example, you can have different impulses, different settings for your left and right channel. And if you have dual mono routing, you have, well, basically you have the same sound for both your left and right. So in this case, what I need is, I need the same sound for my both left and right sounds, and I chose dual mono. But it's not always like that. For example, I have a plugin called Gain, which is basically a volume knob. So it doesn't have a switch, but it comes in it comes as three different plugins which do the same, but in those different modes. So you have mono, just one knob. You have stereo, but in this case it's quite the opposite. So stereo means that both of your channels run through one knob, and dual is your left channel runs through left knob and right channel runs through your right knob. So it's confusing, and obviously it's different for different plugins. So what you have to do is just figure out what kind of mode you want your plugin to run into, and just choose it. So yeah, and there are some plugins that do not have a stereo mode, that are only mono, and there is a way to work around that, which is probably a topic for another video, but most of them can do stereo. So again, what you have to do is create a bus track, throw all your plugins on that track, and send your two tracks into that. Another thing is actually in Reaper it's called a folder track. So it's, as far as I know, it's only a Reaper specific feature. If you work in any other DAW, you can still create a bus track, but the process is a bit more different. For example, let me grab those two tracks, and I don't know if it's okay. Let's create a new one. So let's say it's proper bus track. So it's more generic way of creating bus tracks. What you have to do is find a routing menu on your track. So in this case it's this little button, and you have to make a send to your bus track. So this, in our case, this is its name, and you also have to mute this master send, so it only goes through the this bus track and doesn't go to your master on its own. And the same with the second track. Disable. One more thing, you can see those two tracks are bent 100% left and right. When you're making a bus, you can also make them centered, and just in your routing menu make it left to right. So it's a bit different, but the result is the same. So once again, you've created two sends, and in this case, unlike the folder track, it's not tied to tracks, for example, so you can drag it anywhere, and so those two tracks can be like tracks 102 and 103, and the bus track can be to the track 1, so all of your bus tracks can be in one place if you want to do that. So in this case, it's just a generic bus track. So for example, you can have it in any place, so you can mute it. It doesn't play. You can unmute it, and you have the sound. So that's just a different way to create a bus track, and it's more generic. So if you're using Cubase, Logic, well, anything, it's just the default way. So number 2, panning. Different people do it differently. For example, some of them do it 100% left and right. Some of them do like 75% left and right. That's not about it. If you have, for example, 2 pair of tracks, let's say 2 rhythm guitars and 2 lead guitars, it's very important how do you place them in the stereo field relatively to one another. So, for example, if you have rhythm guitars at 75% left and right and lead guitars at 100% left and right, they sound quite different than the other way around. So, and this is again, it's about tweaking. So, and if you have 2 pairs of tracks and you have 4 knobs for your left and right, it kind of gets quite annoying to, set one of the knobs, then just try to get the other knob to match, well, the first one, and then do the same with the second pair of tracks and go back and forth between that. It's tedious and annoying. So actually there is a quite good feature in Reaper to help with that. And if you click on your master track or on your bus track on this pen knob, you can actually select several different modes. And if you choose the stereo pan, you actually get two knobs. So what it actually does is, if your guitar tracks are at 100% left and right, you can just use this one knob to change the width in the stereo field. So for example, instead of doing, if you want to do 75% left and right, instead of tweaking these two knobs, you just have to, you know, set it to 75 and you're done. So let's hear how this works. Wait a second, it's mono. So, if it's at 0, it's mono. If it's 100%, it's, well, 100% left and right. If it's 65, it's 65% left and right. If it's minus 100%, it's your left and right channels are basically swapped with each other. So, and if you have like two tracks, you just do this on every pair of the tracks, and you can have like oh wait, that's mono as well. Sorry. Stereo. Yeah. So, as you've seen, I just can tweak the relative positions between those two tracks just using two knobs, and it's very simple. Other way to use it, other application, maybe if you, for example, have a, let's say, a verse of the song which you want at, say, 65%, and then you want your guitars to go 100% left and right in the chorus. You just, all you have to do is to do only one automation. So for example, if it's let's say, well, not that one, it's called with, yeah. So for example, if your verse is at 52.8%, you can just, for example, this is the chorus, you just do only one automation, one envelope, and it goes from 52% to 100%. That easy. So very simple, very handy, useful, nice feature. I'm not sure about other DAWs. Do they have this, or do they have the same names, the same way of doing it? But I'm quite sure they, in one way or another, they have this feature. Maybe it's called differently. So that was number 2. Now, number 3. Number 3 is for people who record their amps and DIs at the same time. For example, you can, if you're using the 2-channel interface, you may use channel 1 for your mic on your cabinet, and you can use channel 2 for your DI track. And that's actually the way most of the producers and engineers do it these days. So if you have amp track for left channel, then you have DI track for left channel, then you have amp track for right channel, then you have a DI track for right channel. Well, that's a lot. So for example, I have this old track template for a double track guitar. As you can see, it's 5 tracks only for one rhythm guitar. So It has preamp left, DI left, preamp right, DI right, and a bass track. And editing those tracks is a little bit of nightmare, because you have to select 2 tracks all the time and manipulate both of them all the time, and that's annoying. I hated it. But recently, in one of the Now the Mix tutorials videos, Ken Chorko, the guy who produced the last Papa Roach record, he showed this very cool trick to organize it, and it's basically you don't have to have your DI track and your amp track as a 2 separate tracks. You can have them as a 1 stereo track. So this is an example of So if you could hear that left track is a preamp track, and the right track is a DI track, which was a little bit quieter, but it's here. So the best part about it, that if you want to edit it, you just have to deal with only 1 track. So any edits, any moves, you don't have to select 2 tracks at a time and mess with them. It's very simple, it's very compact. Now, to record this is, well, quite simple. If you have a 2-channel interface like, well, the one I have in the back, you just plug your amp track in one of the channels, your DI track in the 2nd channel, and when you're recording you have to select, like, record this as stereo, and, well, hit the red button and you're done. Now after that, you have the stereo track, and you in my case, for example, I do not want the DI track in my signal chain. I just use it mostly for visual aid. So for example, if I edit something, it's easier to see the attack of the notes on the DI track, because it's less compressed, it's not compressed at all, so it's very useful, but I don't want it in my signal chain. So what I actually want to do with this is to turn it into a mono track, and I want this mono track be just the left channel. And to do that, well, there are a lot of ways to do that, but in my case I have found one of those Reaper utility plugins. It's called Channel Mixer. So basically you can just reroute your stereo files. So if you have a track like this, you can just use those settings and that will work. For example, if you have your DI track on your left and your amp track on your right, you just do the other way around. So it's like, I don't know, like that. So by doing it this way, even though you have actually 2 tracks for each guitar track, you're just making it way more compact, instead of having, for example, as I've showed you below, 5 tracks for each rhythm guitar. So you only have 3 now, and editing, moving it around, it's way much easier, and at the end of the day you're only using one of the tracks. So I hope that didn't sound confusing to you. So there we have it, 3 awesome ways to organize your double tracking mess in your DAW. And if you have any other tricks, suggestions, ideas, you know what to do. And well, thanks for watching.